What's up, Met fans? Welcome back. Talking Mets and Rob. How's everybody doing? Before I get started talking about Javier Baez to the Mets, don't forget, guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit on that like button. You enjoy all my content, want to see more, want to get notified when I post my videos and when I go live, hit on that subscribe button, everybody. Alright, guys, so Javier Baez to the Mets. Can it possibly be close? I truly think that the Mets are pivoting from Kris Bryant to Javier Baez. And the reason why I say that, not only because Javier Baez talked about playing with Francisco Lindor, but I do think the Mets think that it might be better off and probably cost a little less to get Javier Baez to the New York Mets. We are going to go over Javier Baez and what he said yesterday. We're going to go over Javier Baez stats and what would it possibly take to get Javier Baez in the orange and blue. So we're going to talk about it right now, guys. I truly think that the Mets are focusing more on Javier Baez only because I think there's a little bit more heat and eyes on Kris Bryant, especially with the latest news about the San Francisco Giants heavily involved in talks with the Chicago Cubs about Kris Bryant. The Cubs have been looking at the catching prospect of the Giants, and he's one of the top 5 in their farm system. So I'm thinking, I don't think the Mets have what it takes to get Kris Bryant away from the San Francisco Giants. So I do think where there's smoke, there's fire. And I do think when Javier Baez talked about possibly playing with Lindor, we're going to look at that really quickly. I do think the Mets take that into consideration, even though, as a franchise, you don't want to just take what people say and, a player says. But I do think it's a realistic situation when Javier Baez says he would play second base if he's playing with Francisco Lindor. So we're going to look at it right over here, what Javier Baez said yesterday. So Javier Baez on a PR radio said yesterday the only way he would play second base was only if his friend Francisco Lindor is the team shortstop. That is something that when you hear that, you know that the Mets have the opportunity to trade for him and possibly can even sign him. Now, that might entail Jeff McNeil going in this deal with a couple of prospects. But we'll look at the players in a package in a little bit for Javier Baez. But hearing that and seeing that, guys, that just shows you that the Mets be like, okay, we can get him. We can put him at second base, but he can play shortstop until Francisco Lindor comes back and still have Jonathan VR at second base and still keep J.D. Davis, which a lot of Mets fans still love. And J.D. Davis can be a third baseman, especially if the Mets pivot from Bryant to Baez. And that entails, maybe a Zach Davies can be involved in the trade. Maybe a Kimbrel can be in this trade as well. So I think it is really interesting to look at that Javier Baez said that. And now the Mets have options of where to play Javier Baez. And that is really interesting to look at because Javier Baez obviously is a shortstop. He's one of the best shortstops in the game. But knowing that he said he would move over to second base if he's playing with his Puerto Rican buddy, Francisco Lindor, playing shortstop every day. That is something that I think the Mets can look at. And I've been going crazy that over my last couple of videos about Kris Bryant is that I really want Kris Bryant. I think the Mets are going to get Kris Bryant. But when it comes to Javier Baez, if he's willing to play second base, I will pivot over to Javier Baez. I think that connection that Francisco Lindor and Javier Baez has will just make the team so much better. And they're already a good team to be around. But with Javier Baez in the mix with Francisco Lindor, I think it would just put it to an all-time level. And I think with his offense, with his actions, and the way Javier Baez plays every day with his emotions with Francisco Lindor, I think this would be excellent for the New York Mets. He would be an instant star in New York. And I do think the Mets will actually think about signing him past this year and giving him an extension. And Javier Baez already said that he would play with Francisco Lindor. Not saying that he would give a discount, but at least you know that you can put him at second base with no issues. And I think that's a really big deal to look at. And I do think the Mets might pivot from Kris Bryant to Javier Baez just in case. And they do have options now. Maybe they've been talking about Chris Bryant the whole time to the clubs, and ever since this, they'd be like, you know what, maybe we can get Javier Baez. Let's see what the Cubs are asking for. And I do think it's going to take a little bit of a player that a prospect that a lot of people don't want to give up, and that is Ronnie Mauricio. I know Ronnie Mauricio just hit his first multi-home run game in his career in the minors, but I will give Ronnie Mauricio up for Javier Baez because I think there's a pretty good chance the Mets could sign him knowing that he would play second base because of Francisco Lindor. So who would be in this type of deal? Well, we would have to look at Ronnie Mauricio, Jeff McNeil, and probably another top 10 prospect. Can it be a JT In? Can it be a Mark Vientos? Maybe. I think it can be Mark Vientos, Jeff McNeil, and Ronnie Mauricio. I think that can get it done. But if you look into get in Zach Davies or Craig Kimbrell, it might take a little bit more in the top 15. You know, it might take Ronnie Mauricio, JT Ginn, Jeff McNeil, and maybe a top 20 prospect, you know, a little lower in the farm system. It might take those 4 to get that deal done, and I would do that. So what would the deal be? Javier Baez, Zach Davies, Craig Kimbrell for Jeff McNeil, Ronnie Mauricio, Mark Vientos, and a top 20 later in the farm system type of guy. So those 4 going back with all those 3, I think the Mets can possibly do that trade. Now, if you only think about 2 of them coming back to the Mets, say a Javier Baez and a Craig Kimbrell, I think you would have to give up Jeff McNeil, Mark Vientos, and Ronnie Mauricio. And I think a lot more people would be willing to do that trade for Javier Baez than they would for Chris Bryant. Only because I think even though Chris Bryant I think is a better player, I do think Javier Baez, with the flair that he would bring to New York and the offensive impact he would have in this offense and the defense he would bring at second base as that double play combination up the middle, I do think Javier Baez would be a lot more valuable to the Mets than Chris Bryant, even though Chris Bryant is more versatile. But having Javier Baez on this team, I think will put this team over the top, especially if you can get Craig Kimbrell or Zach Davies to fill out this rotation. I think that is a huge deal, and I think it's big news, guys. I do think the Mets are pivoting from Chris Bryant to Javier Baez. I think you're going to hear a lot more over the next 48 hours about the Mets with Javier Baez than you would at Chris Bryant. But they might be working both deals and see which one sticks. Or with Chris Bryant and Craig Kimbrell, or Javier Baez and Craig Kimbrell, or Zach Davies in that deal as well. So when it comes to Javier Baez, I want to look at his stats because, as you know, guys, I love looking at the stats for a player that the Mets can actually acquire. So looking at his career stats, obviously he's been good over his career. He had a lot of all-star seasons in 2018, 2019, which is nice to see. And in 2021, he's played in 90 games. So he played in almost all the games for the Chicago Cubs. He is batting .245, which is not great. He has a lot of strikeouts, the most in his career of 130 strikeouts. But I do think that he still performs very well. He has 65 RBIs with 22 home runs, 2 triples, 9 doubles, 81 hits. Now, I understand that the strikeouts are the highest of his career at this moment. It looks like it's going to be the highest he ever has in his career, because his highest in his career was in 2018 in his All-Star season of 167. So he's at a higher pace already, and the season is not even over yet at 130 strikeouts. But I do think that he was really trying really hard and really pressing in the beginning of the year. That's why I think he had a lot of strikeouts, because of a contract year. But I think he's gotten it together. His strikeouts have been coming down as of late. Earlier in the year, it was really high. But I do think Javier Baez to the Mets can be the bigger blockbuster trade the Mets do over Chris Bryant. But I do think the Mets are involved in a Chris Bryant trade or a Javier Baez trade. I do think I would take either one if it was me. But I also think the Mets would take either deal with Chris Bryant, Craig Kimbrell, or Chris Bryant, Zach Davies. Or the Mets can pivot to a Javier Baez, Craig Kimbrell, or a Javier Baez, Zach Davies type of deal. So that is the latest rumor, and that is the latest of what Javier Baez said on PR radio, that he would play with second base if he's playing with Francisco Lindor. So I do think the Mets could be heavily involved in the next 48 hours to get Javier Baez. And the package that I said, Ronnie Mauricio, Jeff McNeil, and Mark Vientos going back to the Cubs for Javier Baez and a Zach Davies or a Craig Kimbrell. So that is the latest of the Mets trade rumors, guys. Don't forget, guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit on that like button. If you enjoy all my content, want to see more, want to get notified when I post my videos and when I go live, hit on that subscribe button, everybody. Guys, Javier Baez, look out for the next 48 hours if the Mets are going to pivot from Chris Bryant to Javier Baez because he is willing to play second base. Met fans, I want to thank you guys for watching, and as always, Met fans, let's go Mets.